80 days on the calendar. One life off the stage. A nation still listening and silently mourning. What follows is not closure, but inheritance, and the institutional memorialization of a life that refuses to end. We explore the how. Stay with us. The final reflection asks something of all of us. It has now been 80 days since the passing of Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, a towering figure in Kenya's political landscape whose presence shaped the nation for nearly 4 decades. Raila's death on October 15, 2025, sent shockwaves across Kenya and beyond. Governments, civic groups, and ordinary citizens offered tribute to a man who had been at the center of Kenyan public life for decades. In the days immediately following his passing, the country stood still. Streets were filled with mourners, drums echoed, flags fell to half-mast, and the national conversation narrowed to one subject: his death. The state funeral and weeks of official remembrance underscored the magnitude of Raila Odinga's influence. Since then, Kenya has settled into a peculiar balance of routine and reverence. Public mourning has gradually given way to a deeper national question. What happens to a leader's ideals when the leader is no longer alive to embody them? In this documentary titled Raila Odinga, The Second Act, we examine the period following his passing, leading up to the 80th day, deliberately chosen to honor the 80 years of his life. A life that unfolded in public view, contested, scrutinized, celebrated, resisted, and ultimately woven into the political DNA of the Republic. Since the morning of October 15, 2025, life has slowly returned to normal. The crowds have thinned, the drums have faded, and the breaking news frenzy has receded. Markets have resumed their rhythms, political conversations have shifted to new players and future power contests, and newsrooms have turned to emerging headlines. But memory, that stubborn, private thing, has not. After official mourning ends, nations return to routine, but grief does not follow a timetable. For many Kenyans, mourning and remembrance continued privately. It moved inward, a private practice of watching old speeches, visiting the gravesite, sharing a photograph on social media, or whispering a prayer. Some hark back to church vigils, candlelit gatherings. Some are listening and reliving through some of his favorite songs that once echoed across stadiums and campaign trails. Others visit memory lanes in silence, reading books that captured his life's work. Public rituals have given way to personal reflection. And while the ceremonies have ended, the responsibility of honoring Raila Odinga's legacy remains, and is now more demanding than ever. In interviews conducted over these past 80 days, across regions, generations, and social classes, supporters consistently describe a quiet grief that refuses closure. They speak not in slogans, but in measured reflection. One supporter, interviewed during a street vox pop, put it plainly, saying that although people had returned to work, one does not simply forget someone like Raila. Instead, one learns to carry the weight of his loss quietly. This sentiment captures a critical transition, the movement from public mourning to private reckoning. It is here, in this quieter phase, that legacy is either diluted or deepened. Raila Odinga's political life did not exist at the margins of Kenyan history. It cut directly through its center. From detention without trial, to the agitation for multi-party democracy, to constitutional reform, parliamentary leadership, executive power sharing, and decades in opposition, his presence consistently intersected with defining national moments. His tenure in government reached its formal apex during his service as Prime Minister between 2008 and 2013, a period marked by post-crisis stabilization and institutional reform. Yet it is increasingly evident that some of his most consequential contributions were made from the opposition benches, first as a member of parliament and later as the country's most enduring opposition leader. From those positions, he articulated ideas about governance, inclusion, constitutionalism, and accountability that often preceded public consensus. Whether embraced immediately or resisted fiercely, those ideas shaped debate long after the rallies dispersed. What distinguished Raila Odinga over time was not political convenience, but ideological persistence. Alliances shifted. Rivals became partners. Supporters became critics, and critics later returned as allies. Kenya's political environment evolved in response to electoral cycles and personal ambition. Raila's core positions, however, remained strikingly consistent. Democracy, rule of law, institutional integrity, and political inclusion were not seasonal talking points. They were enduring reference points. This consistency is precisely why his absence now presents such a profound test. The next, and most consequential, phase of Raila Odinga's existence is not about how he is remembered, but how he continues to influence public life through those who claim his ideas. This is what defines his second act. Raila Odinga's second act refers to the most important phase of his existence, the influence he continues to exert after his death, not through his physical presence, but through the actions, convictions, and courage of his followers and supporters who choose to live out his ideals. Or simply, his influence without presence and authority without proximity. Leadership measured not by speeches delivered, but by principles upheld in his absence. Like a teacher who instructs clearly and then steps aside, Raila left behind a syllabus. The expectation is not perpetual guidance, but demonstrated understanding. Supporters who walked with him from his early parliamentary years, and those who joined later after observing his stance on national issues, consistently describe moments of political education, watching late-night addresses with family, debating policy implications long after rallies ended, and learning to frame citizenship as participation rather than spectatorship. What he left behind is extensive and accessible. Speeches, interviews, books authored by him, biographies written about him, parliamentary records, court filings, and archived debates form a comprehensive political corpus. This archive matters because it anchors legacy in evidence rather than mythology. These materials are not sentimental artifacts, they are reference texts. They allow claims of ideological inheritance to be tested, challenged, and verified. As one analyst noted during our interviews, anyone who claims to carry Raila's mantle can be held accountable to documented positions. Documentation prevents distortion. It enables scholarship. It forces seriousness. In the weeks following his death, public discourse has increasingly turned toward questions of institutional memory. How should a nation honor a life so deeply entangled with its democratic evolution? Proposals have emerged for physical and intellectual memorialization. Among them, the idea of a statue in the capital has generated discussion, not as an act of hero worship, but as a civic marker, a site of reflection, a reminder of the principles that shaped Kenya's political trajectory. A statue, not simply as an ornament, but as a symbol of national memory, has been discussed as a focal point for civic engagement and reflection. The intention is not to elevate one person above all others, but to remind every Kenyan of the principles that shaped the nation's democratic evolution. More substantively, there has been growing support for the establishment of a Raila Odinga Institute for Political Studies, or a similarly constituted leadership college. Whether titled the Raila Odinga School of Government, Leadership College, or Institute for Political Studies, such a center could train political leaders and public servants in democratic ethics, provide nonpartisan research on governance, accountability, and civic engagement, serve as a hub for policy debates rooted in Kenya's constitutional framework. This vision would transform Raila's legacy from memory into living, actionable scholarship. Such an institution, if professionally governed and nonpartisan in orientation, could train future leaders in democratic ethics, provide research on governance and accountability, and serve as a space for rigorous policy debate grounded in the Constitution. The distinction between these two proposals is critical. The first one, a statue, marks memory. The second one, an institute, builds capacity. One remembers the man, the other sustains the mission. If done inclusively and with intellectual integrity, such an institution could convert commemoration into durable civic value. If done carelessly, it risks reducing legacy to symbolism without substance. The real work begins. Raila's first act was his life, the speeches, the rallies, the debates, the struggles, and the victories. The second act, which truly begins now, is action without his physical presence. This means reading his works not as lore but as curriculum, engaging in public discourse not as spectators but as informed citizens, holding leaders accountable not as critics only, but as participants in the democratic process, supporting electoral and institutional reforms that reflect his long-held commitments. If Raila's influence is to endure, it must be woven into the fabric of public life in ways that reflect integrity, bravery, and selfless service. These are not easy tasks, but they are the most meaningful ways to honor a life spent in service of the nation. The work that now lies ahead is neither glamorous nor simple. It involves reading rather than chanting, participating rather than spectating, holding leaders accountable not only through criticism, but through informed engagement with institutions. It requires supporting electoral reform, strengthening devolved governance, insisting on transparency, and cultivating political literacy at community level. These are small acts, often invisible to cameras, but they are the true currency of democratic continuity. On this 80th day since his passing, chosen deliberately to honor his 80 years on Earth, it is appropriate to say this without embellishment. The most important phase of Raila Amolo Odinga's public life begins now. Not in the speeches he would have given, but in the actions taken without him. Not in monuments alone, but in classrooms, institutions, and the daily grind of civic life. Statues remember men. Principles shape nations. The second act has begun. The obligation now belongs to those who claim his ideas, to make them living practice. Raila Odinga's second act is the chapter of his life, written after his departure, where his influence is measured not by the speeches he gives, but by the principles his followers uphold in his absence. Thank you for watching our video. This is Insurance World TV, where we document ideas that shape the future. We welcome your comments, suggestions, questions, and corrections. Please share them in the comments section below. We'll be glad to engage and respond promptly.